I gotta be honest, sometimes I fudge up. Well, really, I do other things that involve the F word, but we just started this, for crying out loud. Can we try to keep it positive just for a minute? I miss things. That's what I mean to say. I mean well, and I like to think that I have a pretty good sense of the horror landscape, the comings and the goings-ons, but somehow I just totally miss the new David Cronenberg film. Cronenberg, the surname that is basically its own horror subgenre, known as body horror, but also, as you know, much, much more. Traditionally, he treats the human body as an unstable, muted, and vulnerable medium. Cold, clinical, detached from our typical theological reality. Gore without gratuity, transformations that feel inevitable, psychology that rarely offers any sort of moral resolution, any sort of moral compass even. Call it his Jewish upbringing to his present-day atheism. Cronenberg doesn't really show you when bodies are falling apart exactly, but what happens when the human body is no longer shelf-stable. That's when we decide to go directly into the void. In Cronenberg films, the body is never safe. It mutates. It breaks down. It can rewire itself through pain, through experiences, and typically we, the viewer, well, we get a front row seat to the trauma and the obsession of doing so. Cronenberg as a person, man, he scared me as a little kid. He kind of still does, to be honest. His film Shivers, The Brood, The Fly, they just felt extremely unstable. Like, also still in control in some weird way. Almost like, me, the viewer, I get to have a front row seat to the mad scientist who's going to, rewire the way that the world as we know it kind of works. And that was extremely kind of, gratuitous and, grotesque, and it just felt, really dangerous, but still kind of safe because he didn't have crazy music stings, and his gore was up front, but it was also very clinical. I don't know if you know Cronenberg and you love him, you know what I'm talking about. He doesn't show off. There's not a lot of one-upsmanship with his camera effects. It just feels real. It feels unsettling and it feels unsafe. His portrayal as Dr. Decker in Nightbreed freaked me out, man. I still kind of think of him that way. I don't know. I think of David Cronenberg as putting that mask on, having that knife, and just taking no accountability and taking advantage of the permissions that he was given as the doctor. That's how I see David Cronenberg today. And his new film, it definitely feels like a masked maniac would use our trusting instincts against us, for evil and not for good. Always unsettling, always pushing the envelope. It never fails. In every movie, there's no cure, there's no lesson learned. Just a master in complete control of his craft, and that's what's on full display again in 2024 sci-fi horror film The Shrouds. David Cronenberg at the top of his game, if albeit a little bit clunky. This is Beyond the Grave Media. Thanks for being here. The Shroud centers on a man consumed by grief and the technology that promises to make grief manageable. In the near future, a company develops a system that allows loved ones to observe the decomposition of the dead in real time, using this high-tech burial shroud equipped with live monitoring. It's sold as comfort, it's sold as closure, and is a way to really stay connected. But for our main character, that connection becomes an obsession. As he watches the body of his deceased partner slowly decay beneath the ground, the boundary between mourning and fixation completely collapses. The technology meant to ease loss, instead it traps him inside it. It turns this death into something ongoing, something measurable and impossible to escape. As the system begins to malfunction, or even reveal more than it should, I should say, the film spirals off into different avenues and questions that Cronenberg has always been obsessed with. What does intimacy mean when the body is no longer alive? Does technology help us process trauma? Is AI too much? Have we gotten too close and too reliant on artificial intelligence? Or will it preserve it indefinitely? At what point does watching become a violation? True to Cronenberg, The Shrouds isn't interested in comforting answers. It treats grief like a disease, technology like an infection, and the human body, living or dead, mind you, as something disturbingly fragile. The horror doesn't come from jump scares or violence, but from the slow realization that some connections are better left severed. Because in the world, death doesn't end the relationship. It just changes the interface. The Shrouds is a complicated film. really at face value. On the one hand, I really, really enjoyed the first 45 minutes of this film. It has some crazy horror. It's got crazy technology. And if you just tried to sell me on a movie that would let you stay connected to your loved ones, that I'm going to create a cemetery, I'm going to create a grave plot, I'm going to give you an app and an interface so that you can monitor your dead relatives and that you can be close to them and you can see every single part of their decomposition. If you told me that, that plot synopsis, basically, I'd be bought the fuck in. I was so intrigued to wonder how people could process grief, why they'd want to hang on to something, how they wouldn't let something like that go. If you've ever experienced anything like this, I mean, it's fascinating idea. It's very, very interesting. And I think Cronenberg was really, really onto something. And he does kind of call the film the Shrouds autobiographical, but he also said that once he starts writing fiction, it's no longer him. But we do know that he lost his dear wife in 2017. And this feels, from just the way that Karsh, the main character, is dressed, from the way that his hair is styled, it just feels like David had a lot to say in this film. And it feels a little bit disjointed, unfortunately. And the things that linger on, it's just a little bit... For the sum of its parts, I think it's a good movie, but for Cronenberg, I don't know if it's a great movie. And it kind of sucks to say that. I did watch it twice to make sure that I wasn't tripping and that I didn't miss anything. Like a lot of the newer Cronenberg films, from Eastern Promises to A History of Violence, there's this kind of conspiracy element to some of his new movies, and almost like kind of like a mob crime drama that he's been incorporating that makes it less sci-fi and more thriller. And that doesn't mean that I like it less, because I love both of those movies and I love most of his catalog for sure. I'm a massive David Cronenberg fan. Problems that I have with this film, though, it doesn't know what it wants to be. It focuses in on this weird sexuality, which I kind of really did enjoy. There's body horror and gore and sexuality that feels... It feels stark. Obviously, it's naked, but it feels like you're forced to sit with it, and you know what's going to happen as the viewer. And the payoff is interesting. It's very interesting. You'd have to watch it. I'm not going to spoil it for you, but I do feel like it's just a little bit... It's not sure what it wants to be. And it turns out that this was supposed to be a Netflix series where Cronenberg would go from country to country, and basically, like the main character Karsh, he's establishing these cemeteries and he's showing different, cultures and people how to kind of process grief with this interface that can show them into the tomb, and they can be literally encrypted, if you will, and they can kind of process grief with their loved ones. And then I guess maybe each episode was going to be how different cultures react to that, process religion, and that's kind of where this film it doesn't totally investigate all those really cool ideas. It just kind of like throws together this weird kind of conspiracy, and then if you've seen some of his other films, you kind of know where this is going to go. It's got great actors in it, right? It's got that one dude from Black Swan, the main actor, whose eyes continue to get farther and farther apart as you watch the fucking movie. It's so weird. Then you got the gal from Troy and Inglourious Bastards. What's her name? God, I can't remember. Something Kruger, Diane Kruger, maybe. She's playing different kinds of roles here as we have flashbacks and decomposition and awkward nudity, and obviously mortal decay and diseases, and the processing of grief that she goes through. Then you got Guy Pearce, who does a great fucking job. Just some of his hand movements in this movie are fucking excellent. But I think for the sum of its parts, I'm going to go ahead and say that The Shrouds is worth your time if you're a Cronenberg fan. I think it's probably a 7 out of 10. There is scenes now in the beginning of this where it shows how grief is affecting Karsh, the main character, and how he does not want to let his dear wife go. And so he is just like living in this obsessed kind of possession of her body and what's going on with it. And he's following it and he's tracking it and he's consumed with it, man. He's noticing things that are happening while she's decomposing in the earth. And it's showing these 3D modules, and you can like zoom in, and pretty fascinating technology, pretty fascinating sci-fi stuff. I would say that this is pretty morbid and might even be mildly disturbing to some people, especially if you've dealt with loss like that, and especially if it has to do with the hard C word. People that have, non-curable diseases, I guess. It's pretty painful to see what he's going through and how his life is just kind of put on hold. And there's a couple of jump scares. There's some really cool horror in this, and I just thought that he was going to focus more on that. So when I heard the premise on a live that I did with Frank and Christian and Cody Leach and Pizow, Piz was like, this is one of his favorite movies of the year, and I just immediately put it on my list. He was talking about it, and I was like super interested just hearing him say that. Like, I got kind of almost like getting anxiety thinking about it, because my wife worked in oncology for like 10 long fucking years, man. So I've been really close to a lot of oncology stuff, so I was very wanting this to be interesting for her to see, but also to like process it correctly and like, with respect. And it's not that he doesn't do that, because it feels autobiographical, like I said. It's just a little bit like, this would have been a long series, dude, probably would have been like a 9 or a 10 out of 10. But trying to condense that into 2 hours even, it just felt a little bit short. But not too short, because I watched it twice. So as always, guys, if you're new here, you know what to do. Like, comment, do all those things that YouTubers tell you to do. Talk some shit down there. Share it with a friend, share it with an enemy. Hope you're doing real well. You look great, dude. I'm telling you, whatever you're doing, it's impressive. It really is, man. I can tell. I can really tell a difference. So I love you. Take care of yourselves. Until next time. Cheers.